We're in the city of Solvang at a one-of-a-kind Hans Christian Andersen museum. And I'm here with Kathy. Thanks for having us today.
We're glad to have you, Ben.
First of all, tell me, am I saying it right? Is it Hans or is it Hans?
Well, in Solvang, we're usually advised to say Hans.
So, Kathy, what is the significance of Hans Christian Andersen?
Andersen is the most famous Dane, but he's translated into more languages, they claim, than in any other literature except the Bible. And since Solvang has a legitimate Danish heritage that we want to keep burning bright, it seemed a good thing to honor Andersen in Solvang. And we're located upstairs above a bookstore, and that was fitting too. He wrote over 150 stories. Fairy tales, adventure, they're commonly called fairy tales. He said he wrote them for children, but there were things in them for adults as well. He's sometimes known as the father of the fairy tale. Most of his stories sprung from his imagination.
What are some of the stories that he created?
The Ugly Duckling, which somewhat mirrors his life. Disney made the movie Little Mermaid from one of his very most famous stories. He wrote The Emperor's New Clothes, which is a phrase that you can probably find it in the dictionary. He wrote The Tinderbox. He wrote The Princess and the Pea, Thumbelina, The Snow Queen. We have a lot of printings of the Snow Queen. One reason is the recent Disney movie, Frozen, is based, we say, loosely, because Frozen kind of took a different departure.
These fairy tales that he wrote are ingrained in all of us as kids too, and were read to as we were growing up as well. And this was way back in the 1800s, and they've just kind of stood the test of time, I guess. Yeah.
Right, and as I say, translated into so many languages. Solvang has a lot of visitors from around the world. Many of them recall reading Andersen in their childhood, and Denmark is rightfully very proud of Andersen, and there are many memorials to him. He left his home when he was 14 to seek his fortune in the big city of Copenhagen. In the city of Copenhagen, in the harbor, there is a statue to the Little Mermaid. Was he famous while he was alive for his stories, or was it only after he passed that he really began fame? Denmark was a relatively small country. He was famous. He was something of an artist. He was a good paper cutter. In those days, they illuminations by candles and by oil lamps and so on, and he was fearful of dying in a fire because, it could happen, often wooden buildings. So he always asked to be no further up than the second floor. He took a rope, and so he was prepared to lower himself down the window if he had to, I guess. But he also put a little sign by his bed, and I don't think it could have been a joke, but I think he might have been a little bit serious. It said, "I am not dead, I am only sleeping."
How did this museum come about?
My late husband and I came to Solvang in 1963. He worked at Vandenberg, and we liked it so well. We weren't sure we wanted to go back to Seattle. The town seemed to need a bookstore. We started very, very small and gradually grew and finally went into used books. We had sort of specialized or looked for books to do with Denmark or Danish authors. We collected some Andersen, and then the space became available, and we decided that we would collect in earnest and open a little museum.
This has been open for a long time.
Well, since 1990.
What are we looking at right here?
Well, on this top shelf, we're looking at some old first editions of Andersen's writings.
Wow.
We don't have any of the fairy tales. There's some before that.
It says the oldest book in the collection, 1832.
His tales would come out maybe 4 to a book. They're too short for it to be in a single
Sure.
book.
And this is 1870, 1868, 1848.
I think The Spaniard or something is that one.
Yeah, The Spaniard.
And
Historier? A bulldog? Yeah. Okay.
And I think that word looks like vignettes, and I think it is.
This is pretty fascinating. So it's the fairy tales Hans Christian Andersen's fairy tales, and that's, the Tinderbox, Great Claus and Little Claus, Thumbelina, The Fellow Traveler, Emperor's New Clothes, The Hardy Tin Soldier, Storks.
Storks.
The Little March Girl, Little Mermaid, The Elf Hill, The Wild Swans. Wow. And that's just some of them.
Stories have been illustrated by a lot of wonderful illustrators and artists. Artists like to have a good story to illustrate.
Yeah.
And particularly, maybe it was a heyday of certain kinds of illustration, but Harry Clark is an illustrator. I think of maybe in the 20s. That was an era of some wonderful illustrators, and many of them did Andersen.
Now, what are in these cases right here that we're looking
Early editions of Andersen. They used to have beautiful covers, no what we call dust jackets, just a beautiful cover.
The bust right here, is this of Andersen?
Yes, this photo is from a museum in Denmark, and so these are his real things. There's the rope that he carried with him.
Wow.
That's not the real rope.
That's not the, okay.
But it's symbolized as a real rope.
Sure.
This in the picture is I think.
Oh yeah, right there. There's the rope.
So,
wow.
so that one of the best collections of Andersen resides in the Library of Congress.
Kathy, what are the hours of the museum?
9 to 5.
Okay. And location, so people know in Solvang where it's at.
We're between First Street and Alisal on Mission Drive, which is the street you enter Solvang.
All right. Well, apparently I need to do some more reading, but I thank you so much for having us out here.
Well, thank you for coming.
Wow.